The top story on ABC News Breakfast, the death toll from the capsized Italian cruise ship has risen to 11. 5 more bodies have been recovered from the ship and 24 people are still missing. Rescuers have been using explosives to access parts of the ship in a desperate search for more survivors.
The ship's captain has appeared briefly in court. He's been refused bail and is being held on suspicion of manslaughter. And audio recordings from the night of the accident, the Port Authority can be heard telling the captain to return to the ship to coordinate the evacuation.
Go. Call me when you're on board. My air rescue team is there. It's at the bow. Get going. There are already corpses, Scatino. Move!
How many dead are there?
I don't know. One I'm aware of, one I've heard of. You need to be telling me this.
But are you aware it's dark and we can't see anything?
And what do you want? To go back home, Scatino? It's dark and you want to go back home? Get onto the bow of the ship and tell me what can be done, how many people there are and what do they need, now!
For more, we're joined by our Europe correspondent Philip Williams. And Phil, a couple of days ago we were talking and going through maybe the defences for the captain, but it appears that he's got a lot to answer for in this.
Yes, that tape is very damning indeed, and it goes on, and the tenor of it really is his reluctance, it appears, to go back on board. He seemed to be saying he couldn't get on board, or he wasn't willing to get on board to oversee the final evacuation. Now, he'd always claimed that he was the last to get off that ship.
Yeah.
It may be correct that he got back on later on and then was the last to leave the ship, but he certainly had a period on a lifeboat watching apparently helplessly as all the crew and passengers were desperately trying to scramble off the ship that he was supposed to be in charge of. So on this tape alone, you would have to say he's probably in very deep trouble. And
is it clear where he was when he was talking to the Coast Guard for this thing? Was he on the rocks or was he in a lifeboat?
It does appear that he was in the life raft. Other sections of that tape indicate that he was in a life raft. He was saying he couldn't get back onto the boat because another life raft was in the way, presumably getting people off. He's definitely identified as having left that ship.
Yeah.
And then that desperate plea, in fact, demanded almost a threat, saying, you get back on that boat from the harbour master. I'm recording this, and this is going to go very badly for you. And he appeared at times to almost be in a daze and not able to take command as he should have. And, of course, all that weight is on his shoulders as the captain. All that responsibility is there. And at that crucial hour, it does appear he failed.
And just how many lives are we talking about now, Philip? What's the very latest?
Well, the very latest is, unfortunately, 5 more bodies were taken off the boat today, 4 men, 1 woman. And so that probably leaves around about 22, 23 people still on the missing list. And they're people from all over the world, Americans, Germans, Italians, Peruvians, some staff. We think about 4 staff, the rest passengers. Also, tragically, there is one little girl, 5 years old, who was missing. Her father died trying to get off the boat while trying to get off and obviously trying to save his daughter. He died. And we still don't know the fate of that poor little girl. But there is still some hope that perhaps somewhere some people do survive, and they've now blown those holes in the hull to gain access into areas they couldn't get into before. So who knows? You know, stranger things have happened. We only have to remember, in an Australian context, the Threadboat disaster and Stuart Diver miraculously coming out so many days after that happened. So it's possible, but of course, with each hour, with each day, that hope does fade.
Yeah, well, it does happen. Is it clear that they've searched the sections above water and are hoping that maybe there might be some sort of pocket somewhere?
Yes, that's right. And as you can see from the pictures you've seen over the last couple of days, especially in the underwater, extremely difficult conditions for divers, having to sift through all the wreckage from all the people's belongings that are floating about. But unfortunately, so far, all they have recovered are bodies. Most of them have been in sections underwater. And really, there's been no talk from the divers themselves of air pockets. It does appear, so far anyway, that there have been no air pockets and so no chance of survival. The other factor is, of course, that even if you're in the water for that length of time, it's so cold
Yeah.
that after this time you would have succumbed to hypothermia. So you would have to be somewhere clear with air, quite possibly with some sort of food and water to something to sustain you, because it's now we're over past day 4 now, and so obviously with each passing hour that does look less and less likely, sadly.
And what's the environmental situation? What's the latest on any liquids that were found? Yesterday it wasn't so clear.
No, and that still hasn't been cleared up, but the good news is there hasn't been an oil leak, and that's really significant. They've now got a boom surrounding the stricken ship to prevent any oil from getting away. Now, as we know, if it's rough weather, those booms don't actually work very well, and there is rough weather predicted later in the week. But so far, so good. The company, a Dutch company, has been employed to get that oil off, and it's about 2,000 tonnes, so it's quite a substantial amount. It's in 17 different containers, so it's going to be quite an operation to get it all off. They apparently are ready to go. They're just waiting for the all clear. Now, the all clear, of course, depends very much on the stability of that ship. And as we know, yesterday it did shift a tiny bit. And if the weather does close in and it gets rougher, then there's always that risk of more movement. So it's still a very treacherous operation, rescue operation, not just for those trying to find those survivors or possibly the bodies of those deceased, but also those now that want to prevent that secondary disaster, which would be an environmental disaster that would affect the coastline up and down that area, which is very, very dependent on tourism, and some of the people on the island already have said that this has been a disaster for them economically.
Yeah, sure. OK, well, Philip Williams, thanks very much for the update.
Thanks, Paul.